Bitcoin is open source. Its design is public. Nobody owns or controls Bitcoin, and everyone can take part. That is a big tenet of the Bitcoin mission. And I think that is really important. It's supposed to be this liberating experience when it comes to finance and sending payments, because it is open source, and you can go in and audit it. Like, if you're someone that is relatively familiar with programming, you can go to the GitHub of Bitcoin and look up all of their different programming and actually verify if it's correct or not. It becomes a more decentralized and transparent, thus democratic way of creating a system that everybody can use and be a part of. It's nice that it's democratic, but the fact that you have so many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, can make it difficult. And that's how you get forks. Unlike a company, because within a company structure, you have a bunch of different people. Usually you have a board of directors, and you have, sometimes the stakeholders, the stockholders in that sense, have a say in what's happening, and the customers have an influence over what's happening. But in terms of officially making a decision, it has to be voted on by a board of directors in order for a major change to happen within a company. However, with Bitcoin and with the way it's set up, because it's so decentralized and open source, there's no central authority or voting board that exists in order to make very significant and sometimes less significant changes to the network, to the protocol. What ends up happening instead is that each of the different nodes that are running this blockchain, that are running Bitcoin, they essentially act as the voters, and the way they vote is by what they decide to do with their node. For instance, if there is the release of a new update to the system, they have the option at that point to download that and start running that node and start mining blocks off of that new updated version, or they have the option of sticking with the old version and keeping on mining those blocks. And that's how you get forks. I even got forks out. There's hard forks and there's soft forks, and they all have different properties to them. Yes, open source is a really good thing. Decentralization is a really good thing, but it also lends itself to forks when you don't get consensus. In other words, let me demonstrate with a fork. This is the Bitcoin blockchain, like BTC, born right here. There's like the Big Bang that is BTC. And then the blockchain's getting built up and built up and built up from 2009 all the way until you hit 2017. And then all of a sudden, there's this disagreement, this lack of consensus as to the block size that Bitcoin should be processing, or just and other little details also. It wasn't just about block size when it came to Bitcoin Cash and that fork. But anyway, so you get a disagreement here, and then eventually, like, those two factions, like, one of them decides to keep putting all its energy and emphasis into mining the BTC Bitcoin blockchain, and they continue along this path here. But then you get a little fork that happens over here of Bitcoin Cash, and that creates an entirely new entity, currency, and therefore they're two different projects at this point. That's like if Amazon didn't decide to necessarily do a stock split, because I'll admit, when I first read into Bitcoin Cash and into forks in the first place, I was relating to stock splits, which isn't the case. So if that's what you're doing, let's switch that thinking around. Because with the stock split of a company, you have the same company doing the same operations valued at the same amount, but they're just breaking up their shares into more pieces. Therefore, the total aggregate value of those shares should be the same amount, but each individual share is going to be worth a bit less. And initially, I thought that's what might happen when Bitcoin forked and became Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. I was like, well, maybe the respective value of both of them are going to drop a bit, but that's where I was wrong. It's not the same thing. It's actually a different project at this point. It's a different hashing algorithm that is driving these projects. And so therefore the value isn't going to be in total the same. That's going to be different. But I can't help but wonder, and like, if you choose to speculate on this with me, feel free to offer it in the comments, but I can't help but wonder what the value today of Bitcoin BTC would be if it hadn't forked into Bitcoin Cash. Like, would it be worth more? Would it not be worth as much? I don't know. It's hard to say what a fork actually does to its valuation. But back to the company example, instead of relating this to a stock split, I would have to relate it to what would happen if the company split. Like, let's take Amazon, because such a good example as far as the stock market goes. People are very familiar with Amazon. Whether you trade it or not, you probably use it on some level or another. Like, let's say Amazon decided to continue to like put out Amazon as a stock, but they also decided to split off Amazon Prime, or one of the sections of their business. They decided to split that off and then publicly trade it separately. So instead of having just Amazon, AMZN, you had AMZP, you had Amazon Prime, and then you had both of those things that are running now with two separate missions, and technically are considered two separate entities at that point. And then you'd also have to wonder what would happen to the value of Amazon if that happened, or what benefits there might be. But again, with centralized companies where boards of directors vote on official changes to companies, you don't have stuff like that really happening that much. But with the blockchain, where it is open source and decentralized and highly democratic, and you have the ability to readily do that within the software and within the system, forks happen more often. You get two separate entities out of what was originally one blockchain. And I think ends up giving it less integrity overall, but at the same time, it keeps it a lot more democratic. So depends on what your value system is as to whether or not you think that's a good thing. But yeah, on that note, I will next time discuss what the Bitcoin niche is, and that's where I get into a more passionate rant about the differences in whether or not you can consider it a currency. Because on that same landing page, the video that popped up right there talks about the fact that Bitcoin is a currency, and that's where I'm like, if that's what your niche is going to be, if your niche is going to explicitly be being a digital currency, that's where I'm going to take you as a digital currency at your word, and as that for earning the grade, I'm going to compare you to what a currency's functions are and what you should have to match up to in order to earn that niche, so to speak. On that note, thank you for joining, and I hope this was informative. If you have any questions, comments, whatever it might be, feel free to leave them, and I will see you in the next video.